I'm August 12th. I was an Olympian in the 1984 Games. Almost got a medal. I got the worst possible place, fourth. And that's maybe one reason why I'm so focused on giving opportunities to American athletes. Um, I spent a fair bit of time training in Europe up to the Olympics and after. And what really dawned on me is that X, our NCAA system, which does a great job supporting a lot of non-revenue sports, when you get out of that system in our country, there's practically no real support to help our Olympic athletes. And it's really hasn't gotten a whole lot better in the last 40 years. Um, I got busy with a career when I was done throwing, and then I started a family, and I was very busy with that. But in around 2000, there was an athlete coming out of my college who was a world-class high jumper. And I called him up before he graduated. And I said, so how are you going to keep training? How are you financing that? And he said, I don't know. I have no money at all. And I was like, here's a 7'8" high jumper coming out of Princeton University, and he's not getting any money. And in the period between 1984, when I was on the team, and 2000, the amount of money flowing into the Olympic movement had gone up dramatically. And it's even gotten much more dramatic since then. But he was still not getting any support from USA Track and Field, from a club, nor from the Olympic Committee. So I finally then started a nonprofit to try to give athletes like him support, connect them with donors effectively. And we did that for about 15 years with some success. But what I finally found is that it really wasn't moving the needle in terms of what's the problem here. So that's when I decided to get a little more focused on trying to get the Olympic Committee to understand that they can't keep giving the, only 5% of the revenue coming into the Olympic Committee or the whole system to the athletes. It's not enough money. And you can't have a whole nonprofit ecosystem thriving on all these funds coming into it on the sacrifice of all these athletes. It's just impossible. I actually believe if you really get a look at the whole system, this is like an unknown scandal in our country, what's going on. And we're going to try to make sure that Congress is aware of that, because they're about to take a very hard look again at the Olympic Committee and hopefully make some real changes.
Well, let me take a step back further. Maybe that can give people a more background. Were you always an elite thrower?
Well, I grew up in Minnesota, and I had two parents that weren't athletes. And despite their wishes, I said I wanted to be an athletic person. And I played football and pee-wee football, and I loved it. But my mother didn't want me to play. So I ended up having to do something else, and I played basketball pretty poorly. And I had a great athletic director in high school who saw somehow that I could probably throw things well. And he directed me into that. And next thing you know, I'm going to the state meet from our little private school. And, I almost won the state championship in Minnesota. And I was very skinny though in high school. So, but what's interesting is I got great coaching. And if you look at a picture of me throwing the shot junior year in high school, I kind of look like I did at the Olympic Games, but 80 pounds of muscle on me.
Right.
So then I got recruited by Princeton, kind of, not really, because I wasn't that good, and worked very hard for 4 years. And at the end of that, I was a national class thrower. I wasn't quite world class probably yet. And I made a strategic decision when I graduated to go train in Germany. And because I spoke German, and I appreciated that they had a better system than we did. I'm not sure how I knew that, but they did at the time. And so I went over there and I improved by 4 feet in like a third of the year of training. And then right before the Olympic Games in '84, I was one of the top guys in the world. Great timing. And I had a nice meet at the Olympic trials and made the team. And then I unfortunately, got a little nervous at the Olympic Games. I only got 4th place. I should have gotten 1st or 2nd probably. And then the next Olympics, I tore my pec before the Olympic trials. And then in '92, I was already working, and I went to the trials. It was kind of a bad experience seeing people who I would normally beat by
Right.
5 to 10 feet, throwing further than I was. And that was the last time I threw competitively.
Well, the reason I asked that question, because some of the things that you asked me to read, what we're looking at, you said this young man from Princeton in the high jump, where is he going to go? What's he going to do? Who's going to help him out? From my research, it seems that we're good at least helping the elite guys, the guys that we know have medaled or are going to medal or whatever. But the young men and women who are striving to get to that point and haven't shown that they're an elite athlete yet, and I've had the privilege to talk to several in the last few months that went from junior college or from not being an elite thrower or swimmer or runner or whatever, and then with training, with experience, with growth, become that elite athlete. Well, how many of those have we missed or let slip through the cracks because they haven't had the proper funding or the proper guidance?
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you what I asked Tom Tellez. You know who he was?
Yeah.
Tom, how many Carl Lewises are there every year in high school?
Exactly.
He said a dozen.
Yeah.
They don't make it.
Right.
And I think you're right. It's certainly better now. For instance, the whole Gwen Berry saga, we could talk about that, which is kind of, there are a lot of nuances to that aren't presented in the media. But she's gotten plenty of support in throwing her hammer since she got out of college. And now she's unhappy that she's not getting the same amount of support. But I believe that the impression of the Track and Field Foundation that kind of cut her support back dramatically is that she keeps choking at the big meets.
Right.
And they don't want to keep supporting her when there's a whole bench of people right behind her.
Sure.
And she already had her shot. You know, they've given her, I mean, it was a pretty large amount of money, over the last couple of years. And I'm not an athlete now, so I'm not sure what it's about, but I think there's like the fact that the USA Track and Field Foundation actually exists is a great thing. And it's run for the most part independent of USA Track and Field, which in my opinion is totally dysfunctional and not a good thing for us to emulate. I mean, that place should be restarted. And the bylaws redone and the whole leadership probably, and there's a whole, are you familiar with the whole compensation scandal going on with the CEO there?
I'm not as in-depth as maybe as I should, but I have a pretty good idea. And from what I've read, I'm not really pleased with what I'm seeing.
Yeah, you can't make it up. But I think for like what you're saying is if you're in some events, it takes a long time to get good, to get world class. We're talking the more technical events and the pole vault, for instance, or the triple jump. And there's probably for like a young male jumper who gets out of school, didn't have great coaching, started late maybe, he's jumping 53 feet. I don't know who's going to give him any money. But the kid could jump 57 with 1 year of good training, right? With a good coach.
I actually had Willie Banks on a few weeks ago, and that was kind of his story was, I was good, but I became much better, just because he got around it. We talked to Al Joyner in a couple of weeks as well. So, well, give me a little background on the Amateur Sports Act of 1978, because I can see that's going to be a linchpin to kind of what we're talking about.
Yeah, well, they at the time, and I haven't done enough deep homework like I should, but my impression is that the Olympic Committee was like a big mishmash of volunteer organizations that had, 200 plus people voting on very important things, and most of them were just, they didn't know each other. It was a big zoo.
Right.
And the Congress finally got together and they passed some laws, the Amateur Sports Act, and there was a senator in Alaska who was behind this. They prescribed who does what, how it's going to be done. They gave the United States Olympic Committee monopoly rights to selling the media in this country, or selling the rings, etc. They made the Olympic Committee, the U.S. Olympic Committee, responsible for fielding a team at the Olympics. And I think they gave and it wasn't black and white how, but they gave the Olympic Committee responsibility to oversee all the national governing bodies. One of the things that wasn't in the law, which was really, really a mistake, were hard metrics and accountabilities for what they did with the monopoly. So for the most part, the USOC has had no supervision for 40 years, which is, in my opinion, how an organization bloats itself up to 600 plus employees that is really only responsible for bringing the team to the Olympic Games, selling the rights of Team USA to corporations, I guess promoting the Olympic movement in the United States, and working with bids for games here in the US. Because as you know, in track and field, they have nothing to do with the athletes. They really don't.
Right.
They like to put them all over their website as if they do, but they don't. And that's pretty much for every sport. Some of the really small NGBs, I think they're more involved in because they have to be, because they don't have budget, they don't have people, etc. But so effectively, this organization kind of grew organically. And if you look at where the revenues went from 1980 to now, it's pretty staggering. Both of my screens now are full. Otherwise, I could grab some information and just read from it. You know, and I think in 1960, the USOC's budget was about $4 million every 4 years. And then it went up to 10 million, 15 million, 25 million every 4 years. And now in 2018, I believe, you know, they had income of $350 million.
Right.
Yeah, that's kind of real money now, right? And if you add up the whole system, and very few people have ever even thought about this, and I actually got some interns, paid by the way, to take all the tax returns of all these NGBs, put them in a spreadsheet, and highlight the key numbers: revenue, employees, executive comp, etc. And this is, in my opinion, if the American public knew what has grown in this without supervision, people would be pretty upset. You know, they have, when I did this, 5,300 employees, a budget, executive, staff comp and benefits, $330 million. Athlete support, there's a line, or individual support, which I assume means athletes, right? Mm-hmm. There's 35 some million dollars, and then there's another line that's similar to that, grants, and I assume that could be grants to athletes. There's another like 30 million odd line. So it's like, you know, $75 million of money going to the athletes.
Out so of paying out so much more to organize and not for the organization. Yeah.
And by the way, let's look at how they've done organizing. 1968. What percentage of the medals do we get at the Summer Olympic Games?
Right.
20. They were in Mexico City, no home court advantage, anything like that. What are we getting now? 11 or 12%.
If that, yeah, right.
Yeah. The last Winter Games, we got 6%.
Yeah.
These people haven't done a good job. In fact, they should get an F.
Well, yeah. And what you mentioned, as I'm thinking about it, we have the U.S. Olympic Committee. They're not putting on their individual Olympic trials for track, for boxing, for speed skating. No. Yeah. The individual governing bodies do that, right? Yeah.
But they get to put it's officially, it's the USOC sponsored event or, you know, official event. So they put their big sign up. They have nothing to do with it.
Right. Yeah. Okay. My job is to speak. I can't speak right now.
So this is why when you look at like some of the compensation patterns of the people who run these organizations, you know, their comp goes up 15, 20% a year for like 7 years in a row. And then by the end of it, you have a general counsel at the USOC making $650,000, I think. when the average general counsel at a nonprofit of that size is probably half that.
Yeah.
You know, again, no supervision. And by the way, the boards in most of these organizations asleep at the switch, or insiders who are just playing the game.
Right. So how do we go about the reform then? Because obviously this is something you're working on, something you're starting, but when you have to go into something that's that deep and you have to get the people that are benefiting from the problem to understand that there's a problem, how do you make that fix?
Well, those are great questions, because one of the big disappointments I've had in the last few years is trying to get the support of Olympians. And most of them, they're silent. Now, if I was an Olympian right now and active, and I thought that my future depended upon the goodwill of certain people in the system, you know what? Maybe I understand that.
Right.
But I'm talking ones who are 10 years out, 15 years out, not a lot of resonance, which is disappointing to me. Now, it may also be that once this starts to take some momentum, that suddenly everybody is going to jump in.
Right.
So that's one, you know, I'm confirming what you just said there. It's very interesting that there's been hardly any talk in the press about what's going on in Washington with the USOC right now. And another sort of obstacle we have is the traditional media. They kind of rely upon the USOC for their information about the Olympic sport. And if they start writing critical pieces, they don't get it. You know, the Washington Post has been on top of this in a very, very impactful way. Not only the staff writers, but Sally Jenkins, who's a columnist. I think I probably have in my database 30 articles from the Washington Post about the USOC since 2016. And they're all pretty factual. So, yeah.
But as you said, you're butting up against the system, and you're relying on the system to give you the information. So that's a hard thing, even though we live hopefully in a day and age where we don't rely on the system as much to get our facts, because we can investigate ourselves. But as you said, the traditional media is like, well, if I don't get what I need from them, I'm not going to get what I need from them.
Well, what's interesting, speaking of like disclosure and information and getting that from the USOC, for instance, is that the day before the Senate voted unanimously on this bill, they released all sorts of information the day before that they have never done before.
Right.
So that was a good sign.
And this was in August, right?
It was August 3rd. They released all this stuff on their website, just like pages of it. And then the next day, the Senate voted, and we're waiting for the House to do the same. And 10 days after that, if Trump doesn't act upon it, it will become law. Okay. We should at some point talk about what they're actually proposing there.
Well, how much of this, and not to get too far into the games and whatnot, of these little problems and these little solutions that we're trying to find, not little, obviously, I don't mean to belittle it, but we're looking at now a postponement of already postponed the 2020 games. When we're looking, I've talked to a few athletes of now that we haven't had the chance to peak. You mentioned you had a games where you weren't completely healthy. If that had been your first attempt at making the games, and then, you know, the next year or the next 4 years, you don't recover, you've missed your opportunity. How much of this we're looking at as in compensation or at least insurance or whatnot to, hey, we're putting you out on the playing field. You're trying to make the Olympic Games, and various different things keep you from doing that. Can we give you your life back? How do we do? We were talking about equity, transparency, fairness, and opportunity. When you don't have the opportunity because of things out of your control, how does that affect an athlete, and how or what you're doing and looking at, how will that change that? There's a question in there someplace.
Well, you've probably heard the quip that a crisis is a great time, is a great opportunity to change things, right?
Right.
And if I was Sarah Hirschland, I would say to myself, okay, right now these athletes are at best getting 10% of the money that comes into this organization.
Right.
We like to say that 83% of the spending is athlete-centric program service. Well, you tell me.
Right.
If she were to say, okay, we're going to agree that 25% of every dollar that comes in here after the first of this coming year is off the top line direct athlete support, that would be a game changer. And I would challenge her to actually do that, because she talks a big game now about athletes. She's getting paid $850,000 a year in Colorado Springs, where the cost of living is half what it is in New York.
Right.
And she, I think, with great fanfare, said she's taking a 10% pay cut on her bonus.
Gee, thanks.
Wow. Okay. But more importantly, there are hundreds of contractors getting paid tons of money. There are, I think at the USSC alone, over 100, there were, a lot of people have been laid off, what they had to do, right?
Right.
There were at one point like over 120 people getting paid over 100 grand a year there. The average pay there, I calculated per their last tax filing, was $93,000 a year. Now, you're living in Colorado Springs, you're a monopolist. You don't get fired if the team doesn't do well. The money is just kind of coming in from the rights for the most part.
Right.
Why are these people paid so much? I mean, I just don't get it.
And what are they doing to deserve
and
that?
what are they doing? And I can tell you, Frank, if you go into the congressional record, there were some hearings that John McCain had about the Olympic Committee in 2003. You could say them all right today, the same statements. Nothing's changed. In fact, it's gotten worse. So about how dysfunctional the whole thing is.
Well, as you said, you have an organization.
We'll see. I think they have to change now because Congress is going to make them.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well,
and
you said you have an organization that's been given carte blanche to monitor itself, to govern itself without any oversight. And I like to think the best of people. I really do. And I truly mean that when I say that. But at some point, when you get to that situation where it's like we may have entered into this with the best of intentions, but as you said, well, I need a raise, they need a raise, we need a raise. Okay, well, we can put that through, not a big deal at all. And it doesn't start off as anything major until you start looking at it down the road 10, 15, 20 years later, and you're going, what have we done to earn this? And what are we doing to make things better for everybody else? I don't mind if someone's making a boatload of money as long as they're doing their job or doing a job that we should be expecting for them to do that. But as you're saying, what are they getting done? Providing value to stakeholders. And by the way, if they're going to get paid that kind of money, they're supposed to have skin in the game. And they have none. Zero. The athletes have skin in the game. They got their whole lives on hold to go chase this Olympic dream. But these bureaucrats running these organizations, none. And as we said, we have a year without the games. And I'm going to assume, I don't know this for a fact, but I'm going to assume that the people that you're talking about without skin in the game are still getting paid. And the people that are trying to hold their lives for another year and hope they're still on top of their game in another year, if we have games in another year, are still in whatever limbo they were already. I agree. In this is a social justice issue. This is an equity issue for athletes of all colors. These people have been taken advantage of for decades. And I don't hear any outcry, which really confuses me. Well, I think, and I'm going to put words in a lot of people's mouths here. I think what it is it's kind of what we say with NCAA athletes. Well, you've been given this opportunity and we're taking care of X, Y, and Z. So if you are an elite swimmer or an elite miler or whomever, boxer, we're going to put you up in, in Colorado Springs during the Olympic trials. We're going to do this and do that. And you get a chance to chase your dream. And we as a society, that's a great thing. They've had an opportunity to chase their dream, to do what they want to do. And they've got some housing, they've got some funding, and everything sounds like it's good from the outside. But as you're telling us on the inside, it's not necessarily so.
I would argue that non-revenue scholarship athletes have a great deal. And the NCAA should be lauded for supporting all these sports still to the degree they do. They effectively subsidize the USOC's mission billions of dollars a year. My son was a D1 football player. And, he kind of educated me on the sacrifices demanded of the players while they were playing for 4 or 5 years. And unless they made the league, probably not a good deal for them.
Right.
And the NCAA, I think, has been, and certain institutions have been trying to address that in various ways. But it is very, very challenging, primarily, I think, because a lot of the kids come to those schools and they don't have the tools to take advantage of what's there.
Right.
And how do you deal with that?
Especially when you don't know that you don't have the tools.
Yeah. Well, they think, most of them think they're going to play in the league, right?
Right.
Despite the statistics. So, if you're going to be a triple jumper for 10 years, you're definitely putting your life on hold in some way.
Right.
If you're very disciplined and thoughtful, you can probably start some sort of career planning while you're training, but it's not easy. It's not easy at all. Yeah.
And who are your mentors to get you to understand what you need to do in order to be able to do that as a quote unquote profession, as opposed to, if I'm in the NBA or the Major League Baseball or whatnot, I've got an agent, I've got this, I've got that. And I show up, they sign a contract, I get a signing bonus. And then, I can kind of figure it out, but there are also these slew of people that can help me figure it out. If you are just, as you said, just graduated from college and now you're going to pursue an Olympic dream, who are the mentors to tell you, here's how you do that? Or are you tied to them, tethered to them to be able to figure out these people have my best interest in heart?
Yeah, that's a good point. A big deficit in our whole Olympic system here is a lack of a club system. Mm-hmm. We don't have, like many European countries have, vibrant clubs in each city for different sports, or one club that's got all the different sports as part of its program. Typically, they're sponsored by a company, by a municipal government, by the police union, et cetera. And, all these big clubs you see on like soccer now all the time.
Or something like that, yeah.
That's all part of it. And we don't have that here. And it's a real deficit. And I believe that if Congress was smart, they would take some chunk of all the money they pour into these inner cities, and it doesn't seem to do a whole lot of good. In fact, it seems to be hurting these communities ultimately, and would fund some major sports club effort in each of these cities. And these kids could go there as of age, 7 or 8 and play basketball, play team handball, swim, do track and field and an indoor track, do, all these different things, and then have competitions between LA versus New York, this, that. Done properly, that's a game changer. Mm-hmm. And I've even written a paper on this, a short one, but, community club sports, that's the salvation of our society, I believe. But big lift.
Well, and you get better mentorship, you get better education, better coaching.
Yeah. You could have, and exactly, the coaching and the mentorship I had in there, teach for America, coach for America. So the kids would get out of school, commit a year or two to go coach in one of these clubs, So Yeah.
And you factor in things like study table, those kind of things that are as an after school program. Yeah.
Yeah.
I understand.
Yeah. Yeah. So there are little versions similar to this in a lot of cities, but there's no big effort to do this. So,
Well, it's going to take a lot of capital for one thing. And who is the person that's going to say, I'm going to spearhead this and I have more than $9 in my back pocket to make it work?
yeah. Yeah. Well, there's a young man from my college who's looking for a project, and I sent all this stuff to him, said, here's your project. He's, oh, where am I going to start?
Yeah. Well, now let's, as we're getting a little levity into this, let's ask this. Let me ask you this question. When first of all, when did you get to the mindset of, I have a chance to become an Olympian? As you said, you didn't start off from setting the world on fire as far as, you weren't the reigning state champion. You were going to do this. It was like, there were increments. At what point in your mindset did you go, I can really do this?
Well, I got pretty good in high school for Minnesota, and I was enjoying it. And then I went to Princeton, and I got to the field house, and they had a list there of what the NCAA qualifying standards were. And it was 60 feet, about 59 something for men's shot put, which is 16 pounds. In high school, you throw a 12-pound shot.
Mm-hmm.
My PR in high school was 54 feet. So I was like, 60 feet with the 16-pound shot. I've never seen anybody throw that far.
Right.
And that was just to get to the NCAAs, right? So, but I worked really hard, and I went to Germany in the summer, every summer. And, after I got out of school, I was in Europe, and mostly in Germany or Norway, learning, seeing, competing, training, and I always got better. So I made the NCAA sophomore year, and that was fun. And junior year, I warmed up indoors almost enough to make the Olympic team. Warming up, though. I didn't do it in the meet.
Right.
So then after senior year, or maybe it was junior year, yeah, I went to Germany again. I came back and I had a shot put with me going through JFK, and actually this was after freshman year. Now that I'm thinking about it, so I was still a scrub, and the customs guy says, what's that? And I said, it's a shot put. He said, oh, really? You throw that? And I said, yeah, I do. And he said, why were you over in Europe? I said, I'm training for the Olympics. And he said, didn't they just have those in Russia? And I said, yeah, I'm training for the next ones. Now, at the time, I was a 50-foot shot putter. I mean, which is like a nobody. And, but I just had this belief that I was going to make it. When I was 6'6", and I was just starting to fill out. So I had the right body for it and everything. And and then warming up at that indoor NCAAs junior year, I knew I could make the Olympic team. And then I threw 67 feet senior year, which was right on the cusp. You weren't going to make the Olympic team there, but you were getting close.
Right.
And then I went over to Germany after I graduated, and I threw 69 something in the first meet after training really well in Germany, and no distractions, no having to study. And then I threw in April 71 some feet, and then I was like right there. So, it's a progression. And I told somebody today in a conversation, one of my favorite expressions is excellence is mundane. And it's doing the right things on a regular basis. And if you just keep doing them and you have a vision, you get better.
So now we're at the point where we said, I'm throwing world caliber distances now. And I'm not surprising myself by doing that. So where do you make that transition? And this is the same in life, I believe. You make that transition to like, you know what? Now I can do more. Now I'm good enough that I know that I'm that guy. Now I can do more.
Yeah, I kind of missed an opportunity, because had I continued to train full-time in Germany, who knows how far I would have thrown. I was 22 years old when I threw 71 feet, and I had trained full time for 7 months.
Yeah.
You know, because the rest of the time at Princeton, I wasn't training full time. I was, 2 hours a day,
right.
whatever. Yeah. I mean, so, and I probably didn't have the vision. It's funny. I had it up to the Olympics and I made the team. And then my vision was kind of like, okay, what else do I do with my life now?
Right.
Which was a big mistake. And I regret that. But life is life.
Well, and I think we're full of transitions. So you start looking at that next transition and maybe you lose focus on that one thing, but now you do more things.
Well, but sometimes you do a lot of things not very well.
Well, true.
So,
I'm a running record of that, I'm sure.
Yeah. So,
but again, you're talking about family, you're talking about business, you're talking about other things that are not a fleeting thing, as opposed to, I did this for a few years, I was really good at it, but now I can be good at other stuff. And again, you're making a difference with what you're doing now.
Well, we're trying to. This is very, very promising now. I can tell you that the history of congressional commissions on the Olympic Committee is not good.
Right.
So it's got to be done the right way, and the people have to cooperate who are part of the effort. I was a little aggressive 2 years ago, like not a little aggressive. That's the wrong word, really. I thought that to really get it noticed, you really had to go after them publicly. And you may have read that Wall Street Journal story.
Mm-hmm.
We sent this letter to the Olympic Committee saying they should all resign. And Bodie Miller was the most prominent person to sign it. Me, 3 other medalists. I think at the time that was the right message, actually, because since then, almost every one of the leadership except the board members have resigned from the USOC. And I think they're just trying to get out of the way of legal liability, personally.
Well, you mentioned the Larry Nassar thing, and that's something where I think at this point, everyone has to take a second look at themselves and say, how did we let this happen? And maybe this group of people.
How did these board members let all this happen?
Right.
How can those people? How can they still be going to those board meetings if all this stuff happened on their watch? I don't get it. Or there's even a board member. There's a board member on the USOC who was at USA Gymnastics when all that happened.
Right.
I mean,
and well, this is what you're talking about, of not having any oversight.
Yep.
We're trusting them to either recuse themselves or resign or whatever. Right? As you mentioned, the salaries you're getting, I'm not going anywhere until someone forces me out of here. Well, yeah, hopefully.
You will probably appreciate this factoid, which a lot of people missed. Larry Probst was the president of the USOC. And he was appointed that out of the blue, I'm told, because he was friends with Peter Ueberroth. He had never been in the sports world, working his way up in one of the different sports, nothing. He probably wrote a big check to the USOC too. That probably helped. And Larry Probst, if you knew who he was the CEO of Electronic Arts that for decades used the likenesses of NCAA athletes without paying for them.
Without paying for them, right.
Sounds like he's the perfect guy to run the USOC.
Sure. As you said, let's get the rings out there and see if we can make some money off of that. Right.
So ultimately they settled that for $1.5 billion, as I recall. Electronic Arts did. And I'm not sure, do you think the athletes got any of the money?
No.
No. But who do you think is one of our Olympic Committee members now? After resigning as president of the USOC,
right,
because he had other things to do.
Right. It gives you pause for thought, doesn't it?
Yeah. So,
and I believe the best in what's going on and what should be going on. But after a while, you have to say there's more to this than there shouldn't be. Right or wrong, good or bad, there are too many little connections there. It's like, okay, we need to cut that out right now.
It's all connected.
Yeah.
This is a ecosystem of sport administrators, either sports marketing people, agents, or attorneys. And it's like this. NCAA, USOC.
Right, right. And it should be about the people putting on the events, the people involved in the events, and the people that are watching the events or that are engrossed in it. The administration, not saying they shouldn't be compensated, but they have to be doing something to be compensated for it.
But
They shouldn't be compensated any better than everyone else.
And unfortunately, they have been at the top of the list for decades. Not officially, but functionally.
Right.
And that's got to change. You know, we talk a lot about resource allocation has to change. Unfortunately, I believe that this culture is so bad now at the USOC, very hard to fix it.
Well,
and they seem to be saying all the right things now. And Sarah Hirschland's very telegenic and says all the right things and says it's all about athletes now. But it's not, because the money hasn't changed. And until that money changes, it's all this.
And you talked about you're Princeton Ivy League educated. I'm sure you're not the only one. How many former athletes are in these positions that are, you know, intelligent people that have gone through the system and understand what it's like to be that high school kid that has gold medal aspirations or wants to make the team?
Yeah, they're out there, but a lot of them have moved on. You know,
Right.
They're not, and you know, there are things not right all over our society, right?
Right,
And
true.
we saw a lot of that this summer. A lot of people feel very aggrieved. And this, in the scheme of things, is this a big deal in Congress? Maybe not, but it is to the people whose lives are affected by it. And every 4 years, now every 2 years, America loves this stuff. But we don't give it any love, really.
Yeah.
And that's got to change.
Would it be helpful if the USOC reached out to a former, not necessarily a prominent athlete, but a former Olympian to say, we want you to be on the inside of this so everyone's on the same page?
Well, they've already got a bunch of athletes who are in very prominent positions on boards and this and that, but they're carefully selected, not to rock the boat.
Gotcha.
So I'm not sure how this is all going to play out in Congress, but assuming this gets passed into law, there's going to be a commission. And half of the 16 people are going to be Olympians. The other half, there's several criteria for them, many criteria actually. And they will have over 270 days, several public hearings, many private meetings. They will have, by the way, and this should scare certain people, subpoena power.
Oh.
Yep. They'll have a staff provided by Congress, professional staff. So this is like a real inquisition. If you want to put it that way, you could also say it's hopefully a truth commission.
Right.
You know, what has gone on here? How do you have 600 people at the USOC when you could probably do the job with 100?
Right.
Who's behind that?
Why the bloat? Right.
And your board members who have sat there and watched all this happen, only one of them has resigned voluntarily in the last 10 years, I think. I mean, it's like a disgrace. But that's a key part of this bill. The other part that's key, besides some very important things about protecting young athletes, which a lot of people have worked very hard on. And by the way, I'm not the only person who's been, you know, beating the drum here. There are a handful of other very dedicated people who have worked very hard on this in different ways. And they should be credited as well. But the law will give Congress the right to effectively replace the board of the USOC and any national governing body with a voice vote. Boom.
There, that's it. Well, so we can expect, I know we're dealing with Congress, I understand that. We can expect some form of resolution? Any idea?
Well, I've been told that the House may actually vote on this very shortly, like
Okay.
this week.
Okay.
And if they do what the Senate did, and it's expected that they will, within 10 days, if Trump doesn't do anything with the bill, it becomes law. And
Right.
if he, and I can't believe Trump wouldn't support this because it's going to be unanimous. Every, 535 members to 0 supporting this bill. And then the USOC is on its heels in a major way. And this is why they're doing all this stuff with the massive release of data now, why Sarah Herschel, and every time she opens up her mouth now, says it's all about athletes. But, show me the 50% pay cut to every senior executive at the USOC in the system that makes over 250, and then show me the commitment to some slice of the top line going directly to athlete stipends, athlete insurance, and then maybe I'll start to believe her.
Right. Right. Well, I think what we should do, at least from this end, is keep on top of what's going to happen before it happens. I think that what we tend to do from this end again is we report, like I said, I'm quoting the Amateur Sports Act of 1978. Well, 1978 wasn't last week. We need to have an idea of what's going on ahead of time, work such as yourself and other people, and to say, okay, let's keep on top of this and let's keep reporting what's going on. So if you wouldn't mind, again, if we think it's going to be, and we know how the congressional system works, if we think it's going to be this week, that's great, but we know that may or may not actually take place. So let's see if we can come back at this in another few weeks and say, now here's where we are. Let's see where we go from there.
Yeah, I'm happy to keep you posted on all this. It's very important. And we're about to sort of update the website I had for Olympians Rising. It's not really up to date now, but we're going to get it there. And, I'm going to be working very hard if this gets voted into law to make sure that all the members, meaning the senators and the congressmen, and their staffs really understand the big picture, the issues, what's happened in the past, and what's necessary to sort of move this in the proper direction in a unified way. So that's the goal.
Okay. Well, I want to thank you for a little eye-opening. Like I said, the homework you gave me, I appreciate that, because that was information that I may not have ever come across. And it's information I think needs to be shared with other people. And I think that if we keep on top of this, right or wrong, good or bad, at least we can open other eyes as well.
Well, that would be music to my ears, getting more people to understand what the real story is here and why it's important for America to fix it.
Well, thank you once again, and we will come back and we will take care of business.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you.